Hello, guys, and welcome to, I would like to call it a collaboration at this moment between Little Black Book and the Marriage Council UK. We are having a session called Fear of Intimacy, and we've also added an astonishing, honorable, powerful guest. And it's so ironic because whilst I was searching through YouTube for certain people to collaborate with this year, this powerful lady came across my screen, and I was like, "Oh, I probably should reach out," but Kojo was taking a bit long, so God had to push me. You know what I'm saying? And get someone else to even do the interlinking for us. So we have the gracious opportunity to have a conversation about fear of intimacy with Sherna Squire. Is it Squire? Am I getting it right?
It's
Sherna Squire?
Squire. Yeah,
I got it. Oh my
Squire.
God, I'm 2 for 2 with Sherna Squire. How you doing today, sis? You all right?
I'm really well, thank you. Nice to see you both, as always.
Pleasure.
Pleasure,
Absolutely.
honestly, a pleasure. And we also get the lovely, honourable pleasure of seeing the man who cuts his beard sharper than a two-edged sword every week. It is
With a two-edged sword.
Curtis. With a two-edged sword. My bad. I mean, it's closer than sharp. It's closer than sharp. But yes, Curtis, let them know how you are doing today, and let them also know as well who are you representing today.
Yeah, man. Curtis Powell here from the Marriage Council UK. Also from This Is Marriage UK. We have those conversations for the last, 6 years now, helping people navigate the journey of relationships. But if you join us on the Marriage Council UK, you will have access to more than what you see here. So subscribe to us through Patreon, and you can access very interesting, deep, and guided counsel from various experts. Hopefully one day I'll put her on the spot. Sherna will be a part of that too. But thank you all for joining. I hand over to Sherna as well.
That's how we rope people in.
Clearly.
Once again, guys, I want to appreciate you guys for joining the conversation today. As you can see, we're streaming from both Little Black Book and the Marriage Council UK. Please do subscribe to the Marriage Council UK YouTube, and also as well get alongside the patron, as Curtis said. I'm gonna hand it over to Curtis and let him control the reins today, and let us dive into conversation about intimacy. Brother Curtis.
But hold on, we didn't. Sherna, I would love you to introduce yourself.
That is true.
Okay,
That's true.
okay, guys.
That's bad manners.
That's all right. So welcome, everyone. My name's Sherna Squire. I am also a content creator on YouTube. So I have a YouTube channel called Sherna Squire. I work as part of a functional family therapy team. I'm a relationship coach, and yeah, I think that's pretty much me.
She knows her stuff, guys. She knows her stuff. That's the thing. So what we're doing today, we're going to discuss a really interesting topic, the fear of intimacy. And to go straight for the jugular on this, it is very easy to think that we are being intimate when two people can lie on a bed naked, touch each other, and catch feelings. And the assumption is that is intimacy right there. Tell me, is that a correct way to approach or think about intimacy? Is that the bubble that it exists in? Did I miss something to think that because I can lie there with a or my woman that I'm being intimate? Help me understand that.
So I think you raise a really good point, because for many of us, that is how we understand intimacy. We think of sometimes sexual intimacy, and that comes to mind. But when I really am thinking about the term fear of intimacy, I'm more so talking about it from an emotional level. And that type of emotional intimacy can be actually more frightening sometimes for some people than actually the sexual intimacy. So actually it's sometimes easier for me to share, not for me directly, guys, but it's sometimes easier for people to actually be able to connect on a sort of sexual level. And we see that with people being able to have one night stands or all these things where they don't really have that strong, enduring bond. Is kind of a brief encounter and it can move on. But actually asking people to really share their innermost thoughts and feelings and, you know, really open up on that emotional level, people really struggle. So when I'm talking about intimacy today, I'm really talking about it from the perspective of emotional intimacy. And we might not always term it like that. So sometimes for us, we might be thinking of emotional intimacy more as something we would say, like, I feel really scared to be emotionally vulnerable. So that's normally how most people kind of think about actually this idea of emotional intimacy. It's very rare for people to go around saying, hey, I've got a fear of intimacy. You know, we just don't generally talk like that. We would normally say, like, I feel kind of scared being emotionally vulnerable. And that's really what I think can be sometimes the hardest part of intimacy for many of us. Even those in partnerships, married or not married or single, you know, it can be really quite a frightening, daunting experience to try and do this. So, yeah.
What scares me is that, and it's not that it's happening, but I recognize, I've been married for a few years, and I recognize that it's very easy to be with someone for a number of years.
Yes.
In this, what we call marriage, this partnership, this ultimate partnership.
Yes.
And never really share my fears, talk about them without the fear of ridicule. I was always in fear of that. And as time has gone on and as I've become more educated and experienced, that's one of my top issues.
Yeah.
But I recognized there was a part of my marriage where I wasn't open. I thought I was, but there were parts of me that were very compartmentalized, tucked away.
Yes. Yeah.
Because of fear.
Yeah.
And I want you to help me understand why I would have been fearful and why people still are. I mean, if I look at even my grandparents, I don't know if they were ever, I question what they would have interpreted as intimate, but through the generations, you can see it's been passed down. I look at my parents' relationship and I'm like, were they ever really comfortable being open? I don't know, So help me understand, what is that fear about? Because it happens every day.
Yeah, like it's so much more common than we actually give it space to talk about. And I think you make a really great point about you've been in a marriage for many, many years, and it's a successful marriage. You know, many people look to your marriage as a great example of where they want to be. And you think about you now sharing your actual journey of, though you are as accomplished as you are, you have the knowledge, you have the, experience, you yourself recognize that there were still spaces of you that you weren't yet able to share. And I would have to say that has been also my experience years back. And this is probably how my journey began with this topic around emotional vulnerability, because it's really easy to think on the surface that, you've got it all figured out. It's so easy to feel like, when I'm in a relationship, we're going okay. He knows my name. He knows some details about me. Hopefully he knows more than your name. But, and for most of us, we think that we're okay. We we're all right. But it's oftentimes where, for me, I went through a significant breakup in my 20s, like years back. And I remember after that experience, I went and was dating someone else. And it was actually feedback from someone else that was almost like a light bulb moment for me. And he was like, I always do this voice of him, but this was not his voice. It was just my
Don't give him away now.
No, it's like a Barry White voice, so he did not have a Barry White voice. But he was just like, I've never met someone like you. And I'm all thinking, oh, great. Like, I can't wait to hear what this guy's going to say. So I'm thinking, of course you've not. There's only one me. Oh, no. He was like, yeah, I've not met anyone like you who is so guarded, who doesn't know how to open up emotionally. Now, I was really taken aback, and more so because I had been analyzing him, and I'm thinking, this guy's got issues. Like, he's guarded. I'm thinking he's very avoidant. I'm like, why is he like this? Now, you can imagine that I'm doing this to him, he's doing this to me, and now we've both given feedback that both of us can't comprehend. You know, he's never heard this, I've never heard this. And this can be sometimes the beginning of how people start to approach understanding or recognizing that maybe I'm a little bit guarded, maybe there's a little bit of that whole resistance to being emotionally open. So for me, what happened was I took the feedback. So I went to one of my girls and I was like, you never believe what this guy said. And she was like, well, what? So I said, like, he said, I'm really guarded. He said, like, I'm not very emotionally open. And she was like, yeah, you're not. And I was like, what? You know, it was mind blowing. And why I say this is because sometimes it's through our experience of being in relationships or recognizing and observing other people or feedback that we get, that we start to learn insight about ourselves and things that actually maybe don't always come to our forefront, don't always come to our mind to think, am I a little bit guarded? Do I feel comfortable, you know, opening and expressing my emotions to my partner or friends or whoever? So in many ways, that was equally my own journey of how this particular topic really surfaced for me. And just going back to your question in terms of how you said you noticed generation to generation, you know, your grandparents, you maybe looked at your own parents. This was how it began for me, because I was very much like, well, why do I feel so uncomfortable being emotionally vulnerable with someone who I say I'm wanting to build a relationship with, or even wanting to consider marriage with? Like, why? So that was a really good place for me, where I also encourage other people, like, if anything that we're saying resonates with you, then ask yourself why, because that's often the beginning of where you start to kind of just drill down a little bit further than just sitting on that surface level of, I don't know, you know. And that's what I did. So as I looked back at my own parents, and then I went a layer back to my grandparents, I was like, yeah, of course you're guarded. You know, these people don't express emotions. And I don't know, but for me, I'm London bred, born and bred. But we're all proper Londoners. But my parents come from Jamaica. And when they came to this country, you know, it was rough. It wasn't the England we're living in today in 2021, and it's still rough, you know. But they didn't have the experience of sharing emotions and having parents that said, you know, how are you feeling, or are there worries or concerns you've got? They didn't have that experience of someone doing that for them. And equally, they didn't really place much value on doing that for me and my siblings. And it wasn't because they didn't care or you know, have any concern about that, but it just wasn't part of their upbringing, and in some ways it didn't become part of our upbringing. So this is often how, when we kind of get someone who gives us that little insight into ourselves, rather than sometimes becoming immediately defensive. And I'd be a liar if I said I wasn't somewhat like, you know, a little bit. I was like, wow, I've never had that said to me. But if you have the ability to kind of take it on board and just maybe be curious enough to explore it, you can actually really start to develop a little bit more self-awareness of your own experiences and your own self. So that's a little bit about how my journey began. And, you know, just to really encourage people that sometimes feedback isn't really there to always attack and take you out. It sometimes is there actually as a really great opportunity for insight into yourself.
Love that.
There is a question. I'm not going to ask it right now, but there is a question by Zara M that I wanted to look at. How should we do this? I'll tell you what we'll do. So what you've done is you've looked at the first element of how do we say begin to let my guard down.
Yeah.
And you would label that as go ahead.
Yeah, so it is. It in some ways, you know, it can be the first element can be actually because many of us go through dating experiences, let's say, and
Mm-hmm.
if you've had multiple dating experiences and you seem to be getting a similar outcome, and that might be that actually the outcome is you're not getting the long-term relationship or the marriage that you want, that's a great place to start. You know, I know people say go to a therapist, but many of us aren't very naturally able to gravitate towards the idea of a therapist straight away. So you know, I always say to people, just be practical. You know, there's things you can do for yourself.
I want to
At
hear
this
this.
level, if you are already someone who's a little bit guarded emotionally, it might not come so natural to just go to a therapist and open up because it's just not a fit for how you are. So there's small things you can do. So if you notice that you're actually, you know, seeing a similar pattern. Now the pattern relationship to relationship can be so different. One guy could cheat on you, one woman could cheat on you, one person could just, you know, two people could just drift apart. There could be a number of reasons, but the outcome is the same. You're not getting the relationship that you want, you know. And what can really be helpful here is just being willing to kind of dive into that a little bit more and not focus on what the other person was doing, but maybe just focusing more on self and your contribution and just recognizing what do I see as a pattern here. And it's very easy to externalize, and God knows as women we are great at this. Like, I'm really good at this, so, and I'm the only woman on this call today, so I'll own it. You know, we really are good at like, it was him, you know, and
Come on
you
now.
could say that and someone will just be like, yeah, you know, men, you know, you don't even have to give a narrative or
Come on now.
detail. You could just say that and people would already just form their own meaning to these things. So in some ways it's very easy, and this is not to come at us women because men did the same, they'll blame us. But it's very easy to not really have to go under those layers and really kind of unpick it a bit more. So yeah, there's things you can do. You can really start with looking at your relationships. You can even, the more self-awareness you are able to gain about yourself, the better opportunity you have to really start to delve into this. Looking at the fear itself, like behind the fear of intimacy is really a fear around, will I be rejected or will this person leave me? You know, there's some deep fears you're holding on to. So
It's almost impossible to not pick up baggage from experiences.
yeah,
And so if you have been mistreated, and obviously this is not,
Yeah.
we're not going to be able to answer the whole thing here, but you have baggage.
absolutely.
But instead, and I guess what you're saying is, look, don't just say I was hurt. Go a little
Yeah.
bit deeper.
Yeah, because there's more to it. There's always more to it. You know, we grow up hearing there's two sides to every story. Well, yeah, that's true. And sometimes what we do in our pain and when we're going through it, we're focused on his side or we're focused on her side and her contribution to that pain. But what I tend to focus on, especially as a coach, is more about what we have control over, what we can be accountable for, what we can change, because we really can't, you know, enforce that someone else steps up and becomes this. But we can certainly try and think about what we can do differently going forward. And that really gives you a sense of ownership, a sense of also, you know, some control, because sometimes people feel so out of control, they feel hard done to by everyone. But you want to kind of let people know that, no, you have agency here. You can do some things different. You can learn some things different.
Yeah.
And yeah, I had to do a lot of learning and still do. You know, it never stops. Never stops. But getting really real and honest with yourself is a really great place to begin.
So someone in SMH says definitely opening up happens gradually. That's why healing is important, to figure out who I am, what I did wrong, and what caused the situation to turn the way it did.
Absolutely.
That is a very good example of doing what you can do within your sphere. So even if other people are the offenders,
yes,
you still have a role to play in some of this process. It's like you put yourself in that situation again. Is there anything that you have done that's put yourself there to make the same mistake? You're in a cycle of behavior.
Well, do you know what? That is sorry. My fiance is just moving my mic up to me like
That's the love right there.
honestly, always distracted. I'm like, no, because I can see the doors opening. Sorry, guys.
That's
So
I can't do
when
it.
it comes to myself, and I don't know if this question is directly for me, but I think if you are here listening to this and you're resonating with this, sometimes, as this lady just suggested, you know, going away and doing that kind of looking back, is there anything I could do differently going forward? And for many people, even if the other person is the main offender, if you have seen a pattern of, you know, the same kind of offending behavior happening, is it that actually you need to develop skills around being more assertive in your communication? Do you need to develop some skills around setting boundaries, but not just setting them, honoring them? Like, how do you make sure that you follow through with these things? Is it the fact that you actually seem to be quite emotionally dysregulated in situations, and when conflict occurs? Because there's some core things that normally, you know, tip the balance for relationships, I think. And conflict, miscommunication, you know, these things are often the tipping point of where we start to see what looks like a very steady relationship quickly unravel. And these can all often be opportunities for you to learn about yourself and identify skills that actually you probably do need going forward.
Interestingly, I'm going there. I'm going to go there. Interestingly, we see a lot of this in that show, Ready to Love.
Oh, Lord.
I said I wasn't going to go there, but I went there.
Agreed. This was not going down here. This is a curveball, guys. You know, I said like no curveballs on the show.
We thought we'd throw one, guys. We thought we'd throw one. And especially this audience, they're dedicated, Ready to Love fans. Dedicated.
We see a lot of this. I mean, when I'm watching this show, we don't have to go into it, but when I'm watching this show, as much as this entertainment, and it's like it's kind of it's dirty entertainment, really. There's so much the way that they produce it, blah blah. But there is so much to learn from watching others, because oftentimes we're looking in the mirror, really.
Absolutely.
I'm looking at behaviors. I'm like, I've done that.
Yeah.
Or,
Oh yeah.
I'm doing that. Oh no, you know. And I don't enjoy picking out names of people because I feel that it's a form of being judgmental, because I feel like I'm judging myself.
Yeah.
You know, in so many ways. And when I see people there who they've got to a certain age, for example, no, I won't give an example. They've got a certain age and they've got, you know, so many kids with different mothers, and they don't know how to settle. And I think that this is one of the crucial topics on people. It doesn't matter how much money you earn, what your profession is.
Yeah.
If the proof is in the pudding, it's not that we're always going to make the best choice, but what are we learning on our journeys, especially if we go on TV or if we're going to settle down with someone? Can I actually say, this is what I've learned and I will not make this mistake again? That honest level of self-awareness is crucial. And when I watch things like Ready for Love, Married at First Sight, 90 Day Fiance, I'm just seeing an overflow of people who they are afraid to really look at themselves.
Yeah.
I think whilst we're on the topic, looking at yourself is a scary thing sometimes.
Absolutely.
I'm actually running from myself to come to you. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah. And that, I think probably all of us here can really attest to this, because, you know, we're not very honest with ourselves. Let's just be straight out. We really aren't. So, you know, we often do. It starts from early in your childhood even. Like, you know, many of us may have grown up with families whereby there might have been some moments where you felt scared. There might have been moments where things were a bit unstable, unsettled, you know, but the story we've told ourselves is, yeah, if someone asks you what was your upbringing like, you're going to say, yeah, it was fine. Had a mum and a dad. Well, I did. Like, for me, I'll use myself. I had a mum and a dad. But the journey wasn't always very settled. You know, there were moments where there's bumps and some hills and some valleys, you know, but if we as children aren't really taught to really be honest about those moments where there's hills, valleys and bumps, we kind of learn to not really always tell the truth, because sometimes it did feel unsafe in our families. Sometimes it might have felt unsafe going to our parents. Sometimes the parent might have been the one who was making you feel unsafe. Sometimes it could have been that parent, it didn't feel like that parent had time for you. But the story we hold on to is like, no, everything was fine. But that's not the truth. It's not the whole truth. Let's say that. So very early, we can sometimes learn that it's not easy or comfortable to really sit in our truths. Okay. And that can be difficult if you've grown up where that hasn't been always open and there's room to do that. And then to move into a relationship where it's very difficult to sort of admit to yourself that you don't know maybe what you're doing, or you haven't got it all together. And the worst part I find today is that if you are quite accomplished, you look the part on the outside, you have the degrees, maybe you have even a partner, a house, a husband, even children. All these things look like you are on paper doing very well, but internally very alone, internally very empty, eternally just not really actually sure about yourself, and don't really have the words to ask for help, don't really have the words to know where to go with this, because that would unravel the truth you've created. Makes sense? So it's very hard to lean into this stuff, because it would mean having to become truthful, and we don't want to kind of unravel what we told ourselves to sometimes just survive these experiences we're going through. So it's complicated, and that's why, you know, in the work I do with women, and even the work I do with families, it's really helping people to move into a space where we can find the words gradually to actually start to acknowledge how we feel, what we might need, what we would like, you know, those sort of things, because it's not so everything's fine. It's just not always the full picture.
That goes on to a question that Zara M asked, and she's being counseled by the audience as well. A great question. Yeah, she says, but what do you do when no one provides a space for you to let your guard down? But you almost always provide that space for others, hence why I don't bother. I think the first part of the question is more important. What do you do when no one provides a space for you to let your guard down? That's
really, really good question. Really good question, Zara. And I think in many ways, many people feel like this. You're really kind of at a loss of, even if I want to potentially do this, I'm not sure who to trust. Because that can be part of an element of this fear. It's around, like, it's this worry about being rejected or being left, and just really struggling to trust others and to feel like you can depend on others, and they're not going to leave you and they're not going to reject you because what you're going to share is going to be too much for them. And I think one of the things, of course, you know, if you feel like there is no one in your friendship circle, no one in your family circle, or a peer or someone that you could almost just feel like you could gradually begin to test it out. Because sometimes I think if you've got this, you normally have to kind of dip your toe, because you're likely to not feel comfortable to just blurt things out. So it's almost like sometimes it's helpful to kind of think about who you do have in your circle and who you might feel like, I feel a little bit more safer with this person. Maybe what I could do is just do a little tester. And that could be just sharing something that's not too deep, but it's going to be sort of your test of them to see, could they maybe hold that information for you? Would they be able to listen and validate what you're saying. You know, you're testing for those things because that's what's going to make you feel like you can safely open up and maybe share something more. If you really couldn't find that with someone, you always have the ability to reach out to coaches. You have even the Samaritans and things like that, where you can actually just call these lines and actually speak to someone on the other side of the phone if you just wanted to actually begin the process of learning how to share something that is going to stay confidential with someone, or move into the space of looking for a therapist, you know, to really create that safe space.
It's interesting that you're really talking about safeguarding as well, mental health.
Yeah.
And what you just said sounds like taking a risk to confide in someone new.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah, because
Sorry, is that correct in what you are saying? Is that what you mean to say? Yeah.
yeah, in terms of it's very hard if you think you are someone who maybe does struggle to open up on an emotional level with people. It's very hard to almost just take that step from 0 to 10 and share your innermost feelings and thoughts. It's very difficult. And what normally happens is there has to be a kind of gradual pace into this. And that often has to come off your own accord, because someone telling you to do it is going to almost build some resistance sometimes. So you can just take a practical kind of risk of, okay, let me see with this friend if I could just maybe feel comfortable to say, you know, something that isn't too deep, but is deep enough for you that, you know, you want to see if someone could hold space for you. It's a great way to start, because sometimes in our networks, we actually do have people who have a little bit more space to hold, you know, to talk and to actually hold space for us in terms of with our emotions, who aren't going to just abandon us. But our mindset sometimes is set to fear this so much that we actually don't ever approach anyone. So it is important to kind of just feel out who you might feel safe with and give it a go.
Coach, I don't know if you want to come in at point. I have a question, but
flow on, bro. Flow on. I'm typing the comments.
I see you.
Yeah, I'm
Two
just,
dogs at one.
Okay.
Did you want to say?
Shall I go on?
Go on, Sherna. I was going to say something.
Okay.
Go ahead. I couldn't. Do you know what? It's like there's a slight lag, so I'm like, I can't even catch if it was me or them.
I was going to ask a really basic question. I think we've asked this before on the show before, but what is like a one-liner in terms of what intimacy actually is? Like a one-liner, what is intimacy to you?
Okay, so when I think of intimacy, I really think of being able to actually share my kind of innermost secrets, thoughts, and feelings comfortably with someone. Like that for me is intimate. And that is because I probably place higher value on that. It doesn't come naturally or as easy, you know, many years ago, more so now, but it's like that for me is intimate because of me really feeling actually like I'm letting you in to the real me, because we have different, you know, like not saying we have different me's, but for many of us, we have a public persona maybe. And then at home, you know, your family experiences a different you. And then your partner experiences an even deeper you sometimes. So it's really actually allowing someone to really get to that intimate, deeper part of who Sherna is. And that's intimacy for me.
Have you ever experienced intimacy gone wrong? And if you have, how did you handle it?
Okay.
This is a question, isn't it?
That is a good question. Okay.
That is a question.
I'm all on the desk, like moving papers right now. Like, whoa. Okay. Have I ever experienced intimacy gone wrong? And the second part was, how did I handle it?
Yeah. If you have, how did you handle it? Yeah.
Let me think. So Maybe I think intimacy gone wrong could be, for me, being so guarded that it doesn't allow for intimacy to occur in that emotional level. And that can disrupt relationships. And I definitely would say that, that has definitely featured. And the way I've actually been able to learn and actually handle it is actually recognizing that there's an issue here. If you really say you want a healthy relationship, then you might need to go and learn what that is. And, I always say there's a lot of people in the helping profession who they have read things and they've studied things, but to be able to apply it to yourself is a whole other thing. And that is where I would say, like, for me, sometimes it's our past relationship experiences, whatever it is. There can often be something that is like that final pain point where you just decide, you know what, I'm so sick and tired of this. This outcome can't be the same thing each and every time. I'm going to do something different. And for me, I realized that actually I might not have it all figured out when it came to relationships. And that was really hard to acknowledge at first, but it was freeing, because it really then allowed me to let go of the idea that I actually had to have it all figured out. And it allowed me to just move into a space of being a learner and wanting to stay a lifelong learner so that I could continually grow. And, that was really how I handled it. I kind of looked at, where am I falling down every time? And actually, I could not really share those innermost thoughts and feelings. I was really stuck. I didn't have the emotional language because I hadn't grown up in a household with emotional language much. So you can't feed someone on an emotional level with language you just don't have. So I had to relearn and program in language that meant that I could actually connect with people much more on an emotional level and learn to feel comfortable doing that, because it's very uncomfortable if this is not how we, naturally talk. So, and my mum is a great example, because she is not maybe someone who's like full of emotional language. So when I try and move into that space with her, you can see the discomfort, you can see the awkwardness. And I'm like, oh, girl, you ain't done your work. But not, it's not in a bad way. It's just you start to recognize how, that makes sense. That's why you were fumbling and really struggling in so many ways in those relationships, because you just didn't have the tools. You didn't have it's like trying to dig without tools. It's hard. You ain't got the right tools or skills. So you just got to recognize it and go away and do it. So yeah, absolutely had fumbled in intimacy, and grateful to God that it's moved forward.
Just before Koja answers the same question, I will go next.
Oh, great!
I'm only joking. But to be fair, I recognize, in fact, actually the first part of the question, a couple of times I got with girls who just weren't ready. And I decided to, and this was in my teens, early 20s, teens. I just put it on a plate for these girls, man. Put my heart on the plate. I mean, one girl, I tried to hold her hand and she wasn't even ready to hold hands. She wanted to be with me, but she did not know how to do this. Do you know what I mean? Which is weird, because for me, that's the first thing you do. And I think that knockback was seriously about 10 punches in the gut. And then another one just stood me up. She couldn't have relationships. She just stood me up so badly. But I didn't get it until later. But I had given my heart in terms of, verbally, like talking about my life, how I feel. And she couldn't, looking back, she couldn't process it.
Yes.
And so it bounced back. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And it wasn't until, about a year later, it clicked. And then that was the aftershock. And now I'm realizing she took liberties with me, but looking back in the past. But I tell you what's a game changer now for Juanita and I is it's not now, it's over the last, I could say over the last 10 years,
Yeah.
is I have taken the opportunity personally to tell Juanita that certain things about me
Okay.
that I would never tell anyone.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
And of course, with fear tends to multiply outcomes, right?
Absolutely.
You know, you feel things that don't exist.
Yes.
Your perception of what might happen is like, she's gonna burn the house down, she's gonna get a gun, she's gonna shoot me, you know. And honestly, she was the complete, and this is the thing, because I hear people talking on here about that space and they're referring to Zara, which is a really powerful question. This is the thing, this is the game changer, is that she did the opposite to my fears.
Yes. Yes.
And so when you put yourself out there for someone, if you're a receiver of intimacy,
Yes.
sometimes just keep quiet. Tell the person that you heard them, I hear you.
Yeah.
And so forth. And really think before you act. Because what has revolutionized my marriage is that my clothes are off. Do you understand? We can be naked here, but really well dressed up here and wrapped in a quilt.
Absolutely.
Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And again, I point out that one thing I'm fearful of is acting like I am open when I'm very closed.
Absolutely.
And you know what you did? You touched on something. Wealth, social media pictures, position, are a very good means to avoid introspection, to avoid looking in. They're a great mask.
Yes. Yes.
You could take the mic from me. Whoever wants to take the mic from me.
I was just waiting to see if Kojo was going to do his question, answer his fumble. You know, but just leading from what you're saying, absolutely. Like, one of the hardest bits is really just getting really honest, because you fear judgment of others. We all do. We often, well, hopefully we're working towards letting that go. But, you know, there's a lot of things that people do fear. And this society, as it is quick to cancel people, is quick to make statements about you. So people really do feel like I don't have space to really be as vulnerable as I would like. And sometimes what can be even harder is, even when people want to make space for us, we ourselves, because we're not as self-aware yet, we don't think we need anything. So it's very hard to even receive from others, because you don't see a problem. You know, and you can't take on board maybe others' feedback yet, because it just feels like an attack. It just feels like a criticism. And that's why sometimes doing that work on just learning about yourself is good. So if you, again, are here listening to this and something maybe that we're saying resonates, you know, it's really good to kind of look back into your own, sometimes it's just past experiences you've gone through that can lead you to feel like, I'm scared to open up because you've been hurt by someone and it was so deep that you can't go there again. Sometimes it can be more so linked to your childhood and upbringing. And, you know, you can start to just look at attachment. And I always say to even people who are in a marriage or couples or single, you know, what one do you think you lean towards? You might not completely get it right, but there's often, when you're looking at these things, there's something you're leaning towards. And then if you can be a bit more curious about, well, why do you think you're leaning towards that one? It's a great way to begin this journey of just looking into yourself sometimes. Even now, you can ask your partner, like, what one would you say I am? You know, because we sometimes all want to go towards, like, I've got a secure attachment. No, you don't. But it's hard to kind of look to some of the other ones, because that would evoke some thoughts, memories, feelings that you're not trying to go there on. So again, there's gentle ways to begin these discussions. And again, that's how you can kind of start to lead towards becoming more emotionally vulnerable with a spouse, with a friend, with others, because you're starting to delve into some topics that aren't just surface level. So, yeah.
I hear that. What do you do when you're ready to you're starting to become self-aware in your relationship, in your let's take example, a relationship. You're starting to become self-aware, you're starting to do a bit of work on yourself, and then you look across to look at your partner and they're not ready to move. What does one do in that scenario? Because like you can see that you're starting to move in a really self-reflective manner, and you're growing from it, but yet your partner is refusing to shift, to move, to read, to study, to even want to have a conversation around them things. What does one do in that scenario? It's your day today, Sherna.
I hope we're having like a after conversation after this show. Sorry. So, really great question. And I'm going to angle it in two ways, because we have Curtis who's married and long established.
I'm going to sit back here. Who's going to sit back?
I think you would be good, because this is stuff that happens in married relationships as well. People think you can only begin your journey of healing by yourself. I have to go away. I have to go and do my healing. I have to get myself together by myself before I'm, in a partnership. But many people begin this also in partnerships, and that can be tricky, because sometimes people think, do I need to break up to go and do this healing and come back? And there's lots of in-betweens, all right? But what I would say is, the first thing is, you really can only focus on you. It's hard to accept this, because you really do want them to journey with you, all right? But your journey is your own journey. And what you begin to learn about yourself and the skills you start to bring and try and introduce into your relationship can create discomfort for your partner, all right? And one of the things I always say is, it doesn't mean that it's a complete end, but it does mean that maybe you do have to try and find a way that I can express how I'm feeling, because you're going to start to feel like, I feel like you don't care enough about, the fact that I want us to move forward and I want us to do this for us. And it feels like you're on your own thing, or you don't see the value of this. And it's really learning the skills of how to come at your partner in a way that isn't about attacking or demeaning them, but actually really trying to say, really trying to speak from the heart, but not from a place of attack. And that, if you're doing that work and you have a coach or you are working with a therapist, it's good to start to script. Maybe you need to write down some of these things and maybe get someone to help you start to craft that message in a way that it can be read and heard without it being immediately attacking and going to lead to defensivity. I don't even know if that's the right word, defensivity. I might make that up, but defensiveness. So that's really important. It's going to always mean more than one conversation, especially if you're seeing that resistance. So sometimes people feel like, well, I spoke to him and he said, I'm not on it. Or I spoke to her and she's just refusing to hear me. It doesn't mean things are going to be resolved in one conversation, two even, or three. You might need an outside party. You might need to tap into your pastor. You might need to tap into, maybe even just widen the conversation where it's not actually about you both, but just kind of learning to connect with others who are on their growth journey. And sometimes that's why I say, when you're healing, it's nice if you are also starting to connect with others, because your mindset is going to be shifting. You want to have different discussions, and it's almost like you need a little network of people so that you can almost tap into this and not feel too alone on this journey. So I hope that kind of hits some balls there, or the mark somewhere. But I'm sure you, Mike Curtis, have some additional things to say.
Well, you know, it's a great question. It's a great question because I think someone made a comment here. I'm going to just allude to this comment. So, Prepreset, head out we must be equally yoked, I think is what she meant.
Okay.
And you know, I know scripture says, I don't know if we're all Christians here, but
Yeah.
scripture, you know, points to, you know, it's good to be equally yoked. Whatever that means, it has the assumption that,
Yes.
you know, and let's talk about the dating phase. Like when you're dating, you just make the best choice you can. And what we see at the point of dating is what we think is the yoke levels. We're trying to make sure that this all balanced. Like I'm here, is she here? You know, let's not go up there kind of thing, because we want to scare them off. And when you get married, that's when you find out who you are, or unless you live together. And so the notion of equally yoked, it can't be applied accurately. So then we're in a dilemma. And so when you develop, sorry, did you ask a question?
No, go ahead.
So we're in a dilemma because when we become self-aware, and I want to become more intimate, we know what that means. That means I'm going to have to start talking to you more. Some of my fears and my feelings, my insecurities, I'm going to let you know. In fact, when we have sex or make love, whatever you want to call it, let's do it differently. Let's not just have sex. Let's meet each other in a space. The other person might not be there.
Yeah.
And the question is, what do you do about that?
So again, you know, there are going to be points in your relationship where you have to make a decision. These are uncomfortable decisions because, you know, sometimes our mind immediately goes to, well, this ain't going to work. And we don't really put the work in to see, could this work? But I often think, like, you know, if you want someone to do something sometimes, there's ways in which, you know, you can go about this.
Absolutely.
And if you're coming at them and it's a continual kind of, it can sound in their mind maybe like a critique, you know, like you're not doing this, you're always not on it, you're, you know, constantly kind of that wearing them down kind of. You hardly ever get the outcomes you want. Yeah. Now, as a woman, and if someone was thinking about, there's a great scripture in the Bible where they talk about like the nagging wife that ends up putting the husband on the roof. You know, the husband goes up on the roof. It's just like, you know, use these scriptures as a guide. You know, nagging, complaining, critiquing, these things hardly ever pull our partner to us willingly. Okay, they might come, but it's nicer when they come willingly as opposed to feeling dragged. So, you know, if that person is open to even just hearing you out or really just piecemealing, what is it you want from them? You know, because sometimes we come with a list of things like, I need us to have conversations every night at 10 p.m. I need us to, you know, the list is long, it's detailed. Like, is there a way to piecemeal this? Is there a way to kind of think about, well, what it could be an easy beginning thing that wouldn't feel so, you know, out there for that person? Just being sensible about it. Now, if years on or months on, you're noticing that actually you are just growing and outgrowing this individual and there just isn't that connection anymore, or you just feel like actually this just isn't meeting your needs, again, those are conversations you and them are going to have. I never, you know, go in and say, yeah, leave them, or, you know, you have to work with what you got. So again, if you are already linked in with the Marriage Counsel UK, probably great to get on down to, you know, see if there's a therapist or coaches you can work with just to kind of explore this further and maybe come up with a plan around what you can do.
I wanted to look at the same question from my perspective. It is very easy to just move on because you haven't found the one that is on your level.
Absolutely.
And I think that the complication with that is that we are not flexible enough to have, because most of us are looking for marriage. The vast majority of us are, you know, we want a partner, we want to get married. And in that process, that's when we start to find out the other side of who they are.
Yes.
And if we're lucky, we get to find out the other side of who we are.
Absolutely.
But we would definitely see the problems with them first.
Always.
And some people are just not as easily woke. This is a part of their personality, wiring, all that stuff, you know.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Some of us are not easily woke. So what does that mean? For me, that means that when I discover certain things about Juanita, whether it be religious, spiritual, developmental, if she's not with me, what do I do then? Is it because we're married, I just stick around because she's not with me? And it's a fair question, Kojo. My take is we have to practice a level of grace that allows us to, over not weeks, not months, but years, maintain grace so that we can hopefully watch them grow. The truth is that you could be with someone who may never wake up. Is that fair to say?
I think so. You know, and that's the difference between when you're in the dating stage and the marriage stage. We're talking about different requirements now, you know, like if you are someone who is not prepared to allow divorce to be on the table as an option, then you're not going anywhere. This is going to have to be worked through with grace, prayer, patience, you know, all those great qualities that we are going to cry out to God for, you know, because you're not prepared to walk out of your marriage based on this. It's a very painful feeling, though, when you feel like that connection is slightly disrupted or it's changing. It can be really hard because on the emotional level, that can be some of the deepest sweet spots to a relationship. And if there is that disconnection, it can feel worse than anything else sometimes, you know, because you just feel like a stranger sometimes because that person doesn't really know you. You know what I mean? So you're existing in a relationship, but feeling very alone.
I think most relationships do go through a phase of disconnect for long periods of time. And I think, Kojo, in the sense that is the same question. What do you do when you're in that state? And I think that personally, you know, you may not agree, but I think that unless you really don't want to be with that person, stick at it.
Yeah.
Because unless you don't want to be with them for any reason whatsoever, because you're dating, stick at it, because the practice of sticking is an important part of your growth process. All right, let me take it away, sis. Come on, take it away.
No, I think that is like ding, ding, ding. And that's the hard bit to judge it, because when you're not yet married, it's like, do I stick at this? Is it gonna get any, you know, you're trying to look for all the analysis and, you know, forethinking of, can I predict if this is gonna, and it's hard. And that is, it's a difficult thing to be in and to kind of process and make that decision to stick all the way into marriage or to make a decision to exit. Very difficult, and it's so personal, you know. Again, if you have the ability to work alongside someone where you could maybe, you know, get some more counsel around it and you know, explore it, please do. Please do.
I just want you to, for those of us who are now reflecting on ourselves and recognizing, oh man, I've been in this relationship a long time. I'm not really that open. I never have been. For those of us who are married and just I've spent the last few years not connecting, the honeymoon phase is over. Happens all the time. Sometimes at various times. For those of us who are looking for personal development in this area, because we recognize I need to look back at my past, what would be your number one tip for people who are in a place of inside they are clenched? You understand the question? You know, they're not open, even though they want to be or know that they should be. What would be your number one tip for those? This is a heavy question now and on the spot.
This is because there's 10,000, tips.
Oh, we'll go for one and we'll see where we end up.
One. So this is more so for people who recognize that they are closed off emotionally, but they desire to be open. One of the things that I found really helpful, first thing, there are so many free resources online. So if you are someone who is thinking, you know what, I kind of want to understand a bit more about this, go online and just read into it, because it's going to trigger you to become aware of different thoughts and feelings and experiences and memories and all sorts. But for people who really want to begin journeying towards trying to open up, one of the ways you can do this is sometimes actually observing others. And I'm going to give a practical thing. And observing others is a great thing, because you're going to probably have people in your network who you have seen do this very well. And it's almost like, when you see it and you think, oh my God, how do they just express themselves like that? Or how does he know how to just say to his wife, all those, natural things that maybe you desire to do, or maybe you're not in a relationship, but you notice friends who just seem to be able to ask for what they want, or they open up about, their experiences, and you'll start to observe the language. Okay. And the language is really important, because what I noticed most is when I observed people who were very much more assertive and emotionally open, they could use statements that I definitely couldn't use. So they would use things like, I feel really worried about Mikey and me because we've been going through some difficulties recently, or they would just name their emotions like that. Whereas I could use language that was very logical and very, just going around the houses, but I'm still not touching on the fact that I'm worried about me and Mikey, for example. And what I started to do was I started to pay attention to those who I thought were really good communicators. And I started to actually observe how they did it. And these people were people who were able to ask for what they needed. So they would actually be able to say, I feel X, and I need you to, make time for me on a Friday and not have our phones on and actually us talk. I just started paying attention to what others were doing. And this is just a really safe, gentle way for you to actually start to observe and even try out some of this. Okay. And it is often people who really do struggle in this area, they are going to need a gradual pacing. So that's why I say, if you start to observe others with these kind of assertive communicative skills, I used to script, I used to write the statement, because I think, how do you know how to say I feel, and it felt silly at first, but I again didn't have the language. So I had to teach myself the language before I tried to go and, say it to my partner or say it to a friend. And that's where I always say to people, like, just on a very basic, practical level, you probably are seeing or moving amongst people who you think have some of these skills that you're looking for. And you can actually really, just from an observer position, start to pay attention to the language, start to pay attention to how they are able to have these dialogues. And if you need to, pencil some things down, because there's some things you can definitely use and, begin there, because without the language, it's very hard to go into these conversations. You'll fumble, you'll stumble, you'll feel yourself, you'll shame yourself into never doing it again. So just give yourself the opportunity to start to stretch your language in this area.
Wow. I have one more question for you. There was another one I wanted, but with time. Okay. My question for you is, and it's a personal question, compare you to then versus now in a paragraph,
right?
In terms of intimacy.
Okay. Who wrote this? Kojo? Or...
No. Yeah, he did it.
Okay. I mean, in a paragraph.
I wrote this question from the first 5 minutes of the session, actually. And it's been waiting for you. It's your question.
It's my question.
Yeah.
So do me the honors as we wrap this up. Just say that again. So compare myself from now.
Then.
Oh, from then. Mm-hmm.
From then to now.
Yeah.
On the topic of your journey of intimacy.
Yes.
Your growth, your development, and if you don't mind saying where you are now, you don't have to answer that last bit, but compare yourself, contrast your journey, if you can.
Okay. So where am I now? So from then, I was a young woman who absolutely did not have the insight into really how to do relationships healthily, in a healthy way, let's say that. I hadn't had the template. I hadn't grown up in the environment with, this being modeled to me. And that meant that I really went out into my relationships with the little that I did know. And when maybe conflict or relationship issues surfaced, I really didn't have the blueprint as to know what to do and how to fix it. Yeah. And because of my own upbringing in some ways, I also didn't have the confidence to go and ask for help. So I would kind of be in a very stuck place because I didn't really have the confidence to go and ask for help because that felt too uncomfortable. And I didn't have the examples around me. So I was just trying to muddle through in a space of feeling very like things are unraveling and I don't know really what to do. And that was a very difficult thing to even see and observe, because when you're in something, you can't see yourself behaving like this. And then when you don't know some of your own triggers, or you don't know some of your own traumas, and you haven't even tapped into any of that understanding yet, you absolutely externalize this as being the other person who is solely creating this issue. So with the lack of awareness of my beginning, maybe some of my traumas or things that I'd gone through, and then with very little tools in relationships, it was very tricky. And what I'm grateful for is every single one of those experiences in relationships, because it was never really about the other person. It was just God's own little way of giving me an opportunity to learn about myself. And that's why, when you are on your journey of healing, your whole perspective of the experience absolutely changes, because it was really never about the other. It was always about what can you learn about yourself and how can you grow. So where I am now, fast forward, because I won't take you through the middle, is absolutely in a space where not only do I have a few more skills, but I have been able to see that with an understanding of self, you really can begin to transform your entire life. And it's not just in the department of relationships. You can have such better quality friendships. You can have such better abilities to communicate with others, business opportunities, all sorts, because you're learning about how to relate and interact with others at all different levels, whether it's in my business life, my professional life, my personal life. This really does transform all aspects of self. And today I'm on my way to getting married. So it's always a good indication that I've managed to absolutely apply the skills learned and still learn and still feel like, you can move from that space and have the confidence to know that you don't have to stay there, but you've got to do some work. And that's where I coach and support women to do the work and hopefully, just have a healthier relationship with themselves and with others. And I hope that summarizes it really quickly.
It did perfectly well, because it helps us see that it can be done.
Absolutely.
That's powerful. I just want to give a quick shout out to, if I can find them now. So Rich, one safe strategy is to say what you thought, not what they did. I like that. And Emily Anafi said, the more you know about you, the more you can share of yourself. It's an absolute, it is absolutely a journey. Love it. Love this in depth. Thanks, Miss Sherna. Thanks, Kojo. Stay blessed. I didn't get it out, but that's okay.
Don't worry, cuz they see you.
It's all good. They know I'm here, man. They can see me. So, Sherna, listen, we've had a taste. Sherna knows her stuff, and your channel is, can you just tell us what your YouTube channel is, please?
Yeah, so you can find me on YouTube under my name, so Sherna Squire. And I talk all about healthy relationships. I share tips and ideas, and we discuss it. And sometimes I review some shows, but I might have to pause on that for now. There's been so much.
90 Day Fiance.
Oh Lord. I always look for like teachable moments, because it's, you know, I remember being on my own journey and the amount of information I gleaned from others. So there's always things we can learn together. So you can find me on YouTube, and yeah, that's where I hang out. And I also coach women. So I don't coach men, but I coach women who are looking for that sort of one-to-one support to kind of build healthy relationships with themselves and others. And have my own website. So you can find me at www.shernareacts.com. And yeah, that's it. That's
it. It's like it's down to me and you, Kojo, to do the men. Coach the men.
Where are they?
Oh, there are many.
They seem to be missing.
There are many. Oh my God.
You have to draw them in with money. You got to draw them in with the money. Yeah, you got to draw them in with the money.
So many good ones.
Right.
Let me just say thank you all for joining. Audience, you've been lovely. Thank you for supporting each other in the chat as well. Kojo, he hasn't said much. He's been killing the chat whilst we've been talking.
Tweeting and everything.
He's been doing it all. All we can't see, he's right behind the curtain hitting it, and whilst holding a smile in the show. Sherna, again, thank you so much for your time and expertise. Guys, we will see you soon. Again, if you want to catch some of this content, some of it is exclusive. Go to the Patreon site. Cody, if you just throw it up again for us, please. If you click the link or just join the Patreon channel, you will see a lot more exclusive teaching content. It's very intense, and it will prepare you for your single, married, dating, divorce journey. Believe. And hopefully we get a part 2 and a part 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 from Sherna in contribution. But we appreciate your time. God bless you all, and we are out.
Appreciate it.
Thank you, guys.